Well, hi everyone, it's Father Alex here. I'm delighted to welcome you to another episode of the Godcast. Now this Godcast is a first because I'm actually out on location and I am with Lancashire's Police Crime Commissioner and Andrew Snowden, and Andrew's given me a wonderful tour around this incredible site here in Preston. So Andrew, thank you so much for allowing me to come over and see you, and welcome to the Godcast. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thanks. Great to well, I say be here. You're here in the station with me, which is great. It's been good to. We've been just having a walk around the police estate, looking at all the different infrastructure that's needed at the training centres and the vehicle centres and everything, just to keep that frontline policing going. So yeah, it's really good to be here and to talk to you.
If you get a chance to come, I would highly recommend it because it's not what you imagine at all. It's a huge site and fascinating to see. Andrew, you're new to this role. You've been in the role since May, so I suppose the first question is, how's it going?
It's going really, really well, I must admit. One of the things to just absolutely reassure anyone who lives in Lancashire who is watching the Godcast, the just real passion that I've encountered across police officers and police staff across Lancashire. I mean, I think blue light services like policing and things like that are something you get into if you've got a calling for it. Yeah. It's like going into the priesthood. You've got to have a passion for your parish, for your congregation. For the police, I think it's that passion for maintaining law and order, protecting the vulnerable and busting up criminals. And what I've encountered out there is passion. Yeah, there's frustrations about wanting to do more, but none of it's insurmountable. It's all stuff that I think as a new police commissioner with huge budgets over the next few years with the uplift programme and other things that we can really crack on. And a lot of it for me is about getting back to, there's actually a video in the background here we noticed before called problem orientated policing, which is an old fashioned term that's making a comeback, which is it's a bit about focusing in on local neighbourhoods, local communities, and addressing the problems rather than just turning up and being seen to do something about it.
Tell us about that role of Police Crime Commissioner. What is it in a nutshell? What is your ultimate responsibility?
So ultimate responsibility is to set the budgets for the police force, to set their priorities and to hold them to account for delivering against the performance that is set in those priorities. So the police and crime plan, which might sound like a very dull document, is actually is something that I'm working with my team on developing at the minute. That document will set out the priorities for the police force, the things that I want them to focus in on sorting out over the next few years, and over that 4-year period, that will contain budgets of about £1 billion in total over that 4-year period, which is huge. But what I'm doing is trying to get out to as many places as possible. So I'm going to visit every police station this year in Lancashire, meet as many frontline officers, get out to local communities, to really understand what it is that people in Lancashire want to see more of from the police and how we can enable that and how we can make communities safer.
Yeah, and how did you get the job? Was it something you applied for, or did somebody say, Andrew, I've got this job for you, it's made for you? What were you doing before?
So it's an elected job, so you stand for election. So everyone in Lancashire had the opportunity to vote for me earlier this year, of which just over 180,000 people voted for me. So I was very, very pleased with that. It's the highest turnout, highest number of votes any police commissioner has ever got in Lancashire. And I think for me it was that real compelling. We need to sort out antisocial behaviour, we need to take the fight to county lines, gangs, dangerous driving, burglary needs more investigation, those things. I think people just like, actually, we need to get back to basics a bit, we need to get out there and deal with the criminals. But before I came here, I was a director at the University of Salford. I was a county councillor as well on Lancashire County Council, so not completely new to politics. I've come into it with my eyes opened. That's me. Yeah,
I want to kind of go into it. We've done the niceties now.
Yeah,
Andrew. Working in the parish that I do, I hear stories of crime quite frequently, and one of the things kind of people say to me is, "I'll not bother ringing the police because they never do alt." Yeah. That's what they say, and never do alt. Do you think that's true, or would you defend that in some way? But is there an element of truth?
I always think it's a good thing to never defend the indefensible, because you just make an idiot out of yourself. But I think there will be certain circumstances where, for a whole variety of reasons, the police may not have responded in a way that people want. They might not have had the resource to respond, and therefore people do get that sense. I mean, if the police assess everything on risk and threat. So if you ring in the call centre, the contact management centre, which we've just been to, say if you ring up on a Friday night and your allotment's being burgled, let's say for example, but there's currently a stabbing, there's a fight in Blackburn, there's a burglary in process with use of weapons, etc. the police are going to deploy to that because they're going to measure risk and threat. So I think what the problem is, we've lost neighbourhood policing teams in a lot of areas, or they're nowhere near as big as they used to be. And people can argue to the hilt about why, but the fact of the matter is that's resulted in a lot, I would say, of local things that are of concerns to local neighbourhoods not being acted on in a way that people would expect of the police. You know, that just maintaining basic law and order, in rural areas as well in particular. So that's going to be one of my big things over the next 4 years is neighbourhood policing needs to make a comeback.
I think there's perhaps a disappointment that people feel that if they make the call, that somebody will come back to them at some point and maybe investigate it, and quite often that doesn't happen. It just kind of floats by. So is that what you're talking about in terms of making sure there is at least some sort of follow-up?
Absolutely, because I think for people, particularly on low value theft but has a high impact to you and your feeling of personal security in your own home, that's really important. In terms of antisocial behaviour, so people concerned about gangs or about vandalism, stuff like that, that it's not necessarily making a big financial damage, but actually to you as an individual or to you as a local neighbourhood, it's actually really impactful on how safe you feel. So we need those dedicated officers in those neighbourhoods to deal with that, and to build up the relationship. So like in your parish, that the police, you know who your local constable is, and if your parishioners have got concerns, you can go and talk to. That's really important.
And there are those links. If anybody's watching, you will have a local Bobby or a PCSO that you can contact. So do look that up. Andrew, I want to ask you. You've only been in the job since May, but is there a couple of things that maybe you really are kind of weighing heavy on your shoulders? When you're driving home from work after a day, discovering more and more about Lancashire Police, where you think, I've got to get to the root of that. Is there something that's really irritating your scratches points at the moment?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the big ones, and you'll see it in the amount of money that we've already attracted in from central government in the last 3 months, domestic abuse and sexual violence has really risen in lockdown. And for me, that's deeply worrying in terms of, is that new stuff that's being reported? Is it stuff that there's been kind of like, I suppose, small symptoms of it? So bits of stuff in normal life, but now people have been locked in together that actually it's blown up, and there's much more of that. But it's unavoidable that domestic abuse rose during lockdown. And I think that's really sad, actually. It's a sad indictment on modern society, that it is so prevalent. I mean, we're talking large numbers of cases. Nothing out of the normal. It's a national trend. It's not something unique to Lancashire. So for me, how we tackle that, how we get into that, there's so much of it that normally goes underreported. I think something we probably learned in lockdown is a lot of it kind of bubbles away, but people have different releases, whether they go out or they go to work and they're separate or whatever. When people have been locked in together, probably some kind of like unpleasant stuff that's gone underreported has been going on much more widespread than we imagined, and actually it's really bubbled over. And that, how do we solve that? Because once someone tells us, we can do something about it. So I think one of the things that keeps me awake at night is how much is going on that we don't know about, and how many people are suffering right now while I'm thinking about it that we don't know and can't help.
Yeah, and another real sadness is the issue of drug abuse and drug dealing. And I have to say, Andrew, there seems to be there's kind of people that sit on two sides of the fence. One is and I'm talking about social kind of engagement with these people. So we run a food bank and we try and support these people, and many of these people have got addiction problems, and I hit a brick wall because I don't know how I can help them beyond that.
Yeah.
On the other side of the fence, the people that just think, well, stuff them. They've created the environment that they're in.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be giving them food. And there are people that hold that view, and it's very difficult. And a lot of those people that are using our food banks are victims of crime and perpetrators of crime. And it's a bit of a vicious circle. And I've been banging my head right through the pandemic about how we get to the root of these causes. I was just wondering what your thoughts are as somebody in such a prominent position.
Yeah, I think for me, you hit the nail on the head when you talked about vicious cycle. And we've got to find ways of breaking it, because I do agree in terms of, I'm a big believer in personal responsibility in life. You do have personal responsibility. You do to make the correct decisions. We all make for yourself, for your family, etc. Because I think if you get into a state where if you get into a position where the state is responsible for everything, everyone has a kind of like a diminished responsibility for their own actions, which I don't think is healthy. Breaks down lots of things. On the other side, people will have suffered trauma, they will have suffered things in their life to an extent, which means they just can't cope. A lot of people, have been looking into this since I got elected. There are a lot of people out there who, like you said, are either victims of crime or have had really traumatic experiences in their personal life. I've had a really poor upbringing sometimes. I was brought up from very, very humble backgrounds, but I was loved, and that makes a huge difference. So on the other way, I talked about individual responsibility. Does society then suddenly have an abjected responsibility to those individuals? I don't think so. So, if you're purely looking at it from I don't think we should be giving them free food point of view, well, you're paying a hell of a lot of tax for all the public services that those people will take up in terms of health services, police, in and out of housing, all of that. So actually helping them and sorting them out, even if you don't connect with them on an emotional level, is good for society anyway. They will connect. If you can get people off drugs, they won't commit crime. They'll be more productive in society. They'll earn their own way, pay their own tax. And actually, this very morning I was over in Blackpool before came to you. I was showing the policing minister Project Adder, which is over there, which is really focusing in on the drug problem in Blackpool. Blackpool, which is covered by Lancashire Constabulary, it's the highest drug-related deaths in anywhere in England, and there's a focus in there at the minute on this project that we're funding, what the government's funding, around really dealing with the perpetrators of crime. So if you are drug dealing, so you effectively are making profit out of exploiting other people's vulnerability, then we come down on you like a ton of bricks. But if you're the vulnerable person who's being exploited, then we need to help you, we need to get you off it. I mean, eventually it's your choice whether you want to do it or not. It's your choice whether you want to inject or not, but we've at least got to give them a chance.
Yeah. So something I just wanted to touch on was kind of morals and ethics within the way we deal with people. I'm very fond of Blackpool. I've spent a lot of time in Blackpool. I was there last year when they switched the lights on, and I was in my civvies. I wasn't wearing my dog collar, and the homeless person came up to me and asked me for some money for a brew, and I gave him a couple of quid. I'm not seeking any praise for that. And a guy walked past, and he basically said to the guy, "Get back in the sea, you effing tramp, where you belong." And my kids heard that, and we all kind of, and the guy just went on his way. And I think on a social level, I think there's a real lack of empathy towards people in those positions. But what about the police? Do you think there's room for more empathy in the police? I've dealt with police in my role as a store manager for Argos in the past, and police would often come and pick up the shoplifters. I have to say, they were all okay, but there's a real sense of cynicism there. Oh, here we are again. It's kind of that cycle.
Yeah.
What's your view on that? Do you think we need to be a bit more empathetic to people or not?
It's a really interesting question, that one, because I think what you'll find is lots of police officers arrest the same people or have to go and deal with the same people over and over and over and over and over again. And I suppose, boy, you cried wolf, your empathy is going to kind of like drain a little bit. But do they still come out? Yes. Do they still absolutely care? Yes. I was out in Burnley actually on a drugs raid with the local team, and the officers were telling me about how saddening it is now that they're at a point in their career where they're now arresting the children of people that they've been arresting time and time again. I think their empathy with that, the next generation coming through, is probably there. With the generation that's allowed that to happen, some of them will have drained empathy, but do they still care? Yes. Does the police need to have more empathy? I don't think so. There might be individual circumstances, but I've been out today. The reason they want to bust up county lines gangs is because they want them to stop exploiting people and distributing drugs and being a blight on communities. You've got to do that. So I think you've got to have empathy as a police officer. They're in the job to keep streets safe, to cut crime, to put bad people in jail, and to protect the vulnerable. Do they get frustrated with persistent shoplifters or something like that? Then yeah, and I think I probably would as well.
Yeah, I think what you said there was quite interesting about, you know, the officers arrest the same people again, and I think my challenge, if somebody is kind of political but non-political, would be, well, why are we arresting them again and again and again and again? And I think it's a challenge to whether you're on the left or the right of politics. Is, well, when can we actually say that these people have been arrested and the justice has been served, and they're now better human beings, or they're doing well in life? Do you think we'll ever see that? Is that a dream?
We do see that. Yeah, I think we do. We do see that. I think a lot of people don't see the amount that goes on in the background in terms of prevent work, in terms of reducing reoffending, in terms of supporting people when they come out of prison. You know, I met the really powerful thing about Project Adder in Blackpool, for example, is we've got a team called the Lived Experience Team. It's 11 people who have themselves been either heroin or crack addicts, have been in prison or anything, and they are doing the outreach work. Because if I turn up dressed like this to speak to an addict and tell them what they need to do, they'll look at me and say, "Get real, mate, you don't know what it's like for me." And I don't. So actually employing people who've got that experience to do that, I think, can really help. And yeah, so we do, you know, they were telling me about, and they were almost tearful today telling me about this guy who's now been 8 weeks clean after 2 decades of drug use, and he was homeless, etc. So it does happen. I have a bit of a saying, which is, we've got to be there to help people and steer them away from a life of crime. But if they're committing criminal activity, then they are a criminal and should be treated as such at that moment in time, because first and foremost, we have to protect the public. Yeah.
And I think it's right to point out that people do get better, because we've seen it as well at church. But it's also fair to say that there will be areas of across Lancashire, be it Blackpool or Blackburn or Preston, there's certainly areas of Burnley that are known as areas you really don't want to go. Yeah. Do you think we can rid those places of that fear? Absolutely.
And for me, it is. Is that something that the police can do on their own? Absolutely not. I mean, you know, the age-old saying, isn't there, about the broken window? You know, broken windows in communities.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to help clean it up and create that place people can be proud of. You know, healthy, happy communities don't generally have large amounts of crime. So for me, it all links through back to the, you know, this is where I'm going to put my political but not political hat on. It all links back to the government's levelling up agenda and actually meaningfully delivering on that. And that's why I think that you know, the Lancashire MPs and, you know, Anthony in Burnley, Sarah in Hyndburn, Andrew in Pendle and Jake in Rossendale, they're in the east, and Nigel, they're really pushing that the government has to deliver on this, because we won an election off the back of it. And for me, yes, the police have a role to play in that twofold. One, in terms of, actually, there are just some bad people who need taking off the streets, and help take them off the streets, build that community intelligence, get them off. But also they have an outreach role, working in schools, working in local communities, teaching people about what the impacts of crime can be, and helping reduce it through different ways. So yeah, but I agree, but it's not something the police can do on their own.
I think I'm just trying to hear the voice of people coming back at me saying, well, the proof will be in the pudding, won't it?
Absolutely, of course it will.
You know, the proof will be in the pudding.
Of course it will.
I just want to move on to a few other subjects. One about is diversity in the police force. We're very proud to be part of Inclusive Church at St Matthew's. Are you content with how the police force in Lancashire is shaping up in terms of diversity? And I'm not just talking about black and white people, I'm talking about disabled people, people who may be gay, people, whatever. Yeah. Where are you? Where would you say you are with that?
I think happy with how it's shaping up is exactly the way I put it. So, have police forces had huge underrepresentation issues in the past? Yes. Does that make them any different to lots of large organisations? Not really. We've just signed off on a new diversity and inclusion strategy, so myself and the Chief Constable, so that'll be coming into play soon. But the recruitment drives that we're on at the minute, particularly with all, because we've got a big opportunity with the amount of new officers we're recruiting at the minute. For me, it's about, they've got to be representative of the communities that they're serving. Otherwise, where do you get that understanding? You're talking about empathy as well. Where do you get that understanding of local communities, of different faiths, of people's different priorities, of, you know, people who've experienced hate crime? So yes, I think it's shaping up. The latest recruitment figures are showing on all indicators an improvement, and that'll take time. because I think a lot of it is about encouraging people that they can join the police in the first place. If the people don't, if people from a diverse background don't apply to join the police, you can't recruit them. Yeah. So there's a lot of work that's going on with really targeted, not just advertisements, but recruitment outreach into certain communities. And I think it's important that we give people confidence that the police is a diverse workforce, and you can come and all different values are celebrated.
Yeah, I can't help, again, I'm hearing the voice of what people might say. What about a guy who's in his 30s and he's white and he's just come off being a lorry driver?
Yeah.
And is he got as every, are you still encouragement for people like that?
Yeah, we want
people from a bit of experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I met on Friday morning, I was in Morecambe, and I met a detective there, a trainee detective there, who's in his 40s and had a career change.
Yeah.
And actually he passed all the tests, he's got the right mindset and skills. So we've taken him on. So I think there's an illusion that's been created that you have to be a 21-year-old university graduate to get into the police now. You absolutely don't.
No.
If you want to know more, if anyone out there wants to know more about joining the police or anything like that, then you can have a look at the police recruitment pages, give the police recruitment team a ring, they'll talk you through it. There's multiple ways of entry in, but you've got to meet the criteria for the role that you're applying for.
Yeah. And just a quick word about faith communities and their contribution to society. Andrew, I've certainly noticed through the pandemic that without some faith groups, communities would have collapsed, certainly in terms of food support. What's your view or respect for those kind of communities?
Absolute respect and anyone who's listening who's been part of that, huge thank you from me, because I've seen it firsthand. I don't know if you know Andy Pratt, who I've just appointed as my deputy commissioner. He's in terms of the Preston churches and Blackburn Cathedral, I think. He's very active and has been really involved in running a food bank as well. And it's been really important to see firsthand from him how important all those volunteers have been in terms of local communities. But actually, how do we keep hold of that? So actually, there's a lot we can learn from COVID around how many people out there do actually want to come together and do good for their local community, and have probably got a real sense of satisfaction out of being given the opportunity to do that. Yeah. So there are lots of other ways that we can use people to help us. We talked earlier about antisocial behaviour and problems in neighbourhoods. It's like I said, it's not just about the police knocking on the wrong guns' doors. It's also about that sense of community and local neighbourhood. Now you bring people together and you organise events and things like that. So actually, how do we tap into that more going into the future?
Yeah, thank you. A couple of questions from people who I put a post out inviting people to ask questions. Somebody asked me, what's your view on free speech? Do you think the right to offend should exist?
The right to offend.
And how far should that go? People like, I'm a huge fan of comedy. People like Ricky Gervais and Frankie Boyle, their boundaries are very far spread. Some people will love that. I don't have a problem with it myself, but some people do. What's your take on it?
The right to offend, I think, if I looked at Twitter sometimes, I offend people just by existing as a Tory on Twitter. But I think free speech is important. I'm not a believer in the cancel culture, the whole I don't believe in no platforming realistically, unless someone is making a proper hate speech, unless they're actually committing a hate crime, then if you don't like it, don't listen to them. Yeah. I mean, there's lots of views out there that I don't like. There's jokes that I don't sometimes find funny, but as long as it is not deliberately aimed at demeaning an individual person or a group, or comedians do cross the line sometimes, and they generally end up apologising. But I think on the whole, you do sometimes feel we've lost our sense of humour. I mean, I'll probably get a shed ton of emails into my office off the back of saying that now, but that's my view anyway.
Well, I don't give my view very often, and I'm not going to. So if you want to make a complaint, don't do it that way. But just on politics, Andrew, because you've openly stated there you're a Tory. Do you think that the Conservative groups just talk about empathy, talk about progressing things? What I feel about politicians per se is that it's more about point scoring, than actual real social justice and things like that. Do you think we need to argue better you know, at the moment you've got this thing in Afghanistan that's going on. We're recording this in August of 21, and you know, there's so much blame going around, isn't there? It seems politics is about blame.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? Do you think we need to get away from that?
Yeah, I mean, and what's bizarre about the whole Afghanistan situation of everyone trying to blame everyone, when America in the UK politics, we're talking about UK politics here, aren't we? Once the US pulled 90% of the troops out or committed to doing that, it was irrelevant what we did as a country, really. So why are we actually just blaming each other? Why don't we just come together and say, right, how do we help sort out the problem and bring people back? Whilst I may have stated I'm a Tory, I don't think you'll have once heard me mention or point score against Labour any time when we've been together today, because I try to lead by example, which is I am in a political role as a police commissioner because I stand on a policy platform. I stand for election to be accountable to the public, but I don't think people want me as police commissioner to be going around. You know, if someone attacks me or says something political, yeah, I've got sharp elbows. I'll back. But I don't think people. I think people turn off by it. I think you know, in politics, if you can't spend your time making a positive case about what you would do to do things better or make things better, then I think people are just switched off now by listening to point scoring. So yeah.
And I can vouch for Andrew, and I've enjoyed being with Andrew this afternoon. He's very approachable, and I don't want to deliver more work to your office, but you want to hear from people.
Absolutely.
You want to hear people's views.
Without doing a shameful plug, and this is only time limited for when this goes out, I have a consultation that's open at the minute. We've had a few thousand responses already, I think, because people are seeing I am trying to get out there as much as possible. So I've got a consultation that's open. If you go on just Google Lancashire Police and Crime Commissioner consultation or something like that. It's on my Facebook pages. It's on the office website. It's just a short, it takes 10 minutes to fill it out, and it's basically just getting a sense check from people about how safe do you feel, what do you think the police do well, what do you think we could do better, what ideas do you have for making your community safer, and just get as much of that into us as possible, especially while I'm writing this police and crime plan.
Because we live in a fantastic county, don't we? It's a wonderful
love Lancashire.
Place. I do.
And I even brought my wife from Yorkshire. I love it that much. I went and rescued her and brought her back to God's own county.
Good on you, good man. And so, just finally, when you're not got the pressure of this role, what do you like to get up to? What's your kind of hobbies and pastimes?
So me and my wife love walking. We've got a dog called Heidi that we absolutely love to bits. So we do a lot of walking around East Lancashire. I am a big fan of stopping off for a few beers on those walks and getting around it good. My dad is a traditional Lancashire man, and he's one of those people that if you ask him for directions somewhere, he gives it to you by which pub or used to be a pub there to get.
Do you know where it used to be?
Yeah. So you stop at the dog inn. So So we both love walking. Both love getting out and meeting people, and we have a real passion for cooking as well. So actually Sunday evenings for us, we try as much as possible, because we both end up working Saturdays a lot. We try as much as possible on Sunday. We share a bottle of wine and we make a new meal, and try and do something different every Sunday night. And I just think in a relationship, in really busy lives, maintaining that quality time together is really important. My mum lives just over the hill, so we have my mum over quite a bit. Family's really important to me. Like I said, I was brought up, my sister, we thought was terminal at the time. She had epilepsy for most of my teenage years. I had to have major operations. My mum couldn't work because she was looking after my sister. Well, mum and dad were divorced. My dad's got made compulsory redundant this year at 69, having worked in the same factory for 40 odd years.
Gosh.
So we didn't have any money when I was brought up. We didn't even have a TV. I remember at primary school I used to get picked on because we didn't have a TV and watched everything, but I was loved. And I think for me, spending time with my family off the back of that, because I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for their love and support. So yeah.
Well, thank you. That's a lovely way to end the interview. Kind of reminds me of Corinthians, and without love there is nothing, and absolutely is the case. Andrew, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me over to headquarters here in Preston. If you want to follow up on any other interviews, just Google the Godcast. There's lots of interviews there with politicians, with musicians, with comedians, with people from all walks of life. So, Andrew, thank you for joining me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed meeting you, and it's been great showing you. And actually, it's a good reminder to me, because even after just a few months in the role, I'm already starting to get a bit desensitised to all the amazing stuff that happens here. And then you show someone else around and you think, God, actually, yeah, this is impressive.
It is. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you.